Okay, today's story. There were two Chassidim who were on their way to their Rebbe for Rosh Hashanah. Now, Chassidim traveled to their Rebbe's hundreds of miles. Well, they didn't go by Greyhound bus. They walked. Maybe if some wealthy person came by with a carriage and offered them a ride for a few miles, they would take it, but otherwise they walked. And they searched for hospitality because they typically had no money. And this was a journey of several weeks. Shabbos, you have to find somebody who will take you in for Shabbos. And of course, they went from city to city that had a Jewish community, or village to village that had a Jewish community. And usually, they were able to find generous Jews who would take them in. There were two of them. They reached a certain village Friday afternoon, and they asked where the Jewish community is, and they said, at the edge of town, there's a Jewish settlement. So they go to the edge of town, and they're looking, and they decide they'll knock on this door and see who's there and whether they could have hospitality there. And they said, before they knocked on the door, they said, listen, we're just two Jews, and the two of us rather than one, let's try to give ourselves a certain importance. We'll say that you're a Rebbe and I'm his attendant. And we present ourselves as a Rebbe and his attendant. And then maybe, out of respect for the possibility of having a Rebbe at that with them for a Shabbos, they'll take us in. So they said, okay, they decided that was their plan. Now, it's a little simplistic. A Rebbe doesn't travel with another person on foot. That wasn't typical for Rebbes in those days. But they were, So they decided to try. So they knock on the door. Yes, what can I do for you? This is the Rebbe Reb so-and-so, and I'm his attendant, and we're looking for lodgings for Shabbos. Oh, sure, by all means. Come and join us. We'll welcome you. We're wonderful to have you. They come in. They're the only two guests. And the people, this couple isn't wealthy, but they serve nicely, and they treat them very nicely, with great respect, and they spend a very pleasant Shabbos there. Shabbos passes, and they're ready to leave in the following evening, and they say thank you to the host, and the host says, it was wonderful to have you, and we're glad to do the mitzvah. I'd like to ask something from you. Yes. You're a Rebbe so-and-so. Yes. Well, we're married for I don't know how many years, and we have no children. Please give us a blessing that we should have a child. Oh. We should give him a blessing that he should have a child. Yes, and I want you to write me an amulet. Write me an amulet that my wife can wear so that we'll have a child. Write an amulet. And I'm not really a Rebbe. I don't know how to do that. I have no clue what it means. But I said I was a Rebbe, so and they gave us hospitality on that basis. So I guess, okay, we'll go through with it. Gives him a pen and paper. He says, bless you, that you should have a child, in the coming year, and writes something on the paper and wraps it up in a cloth and puts a string on it. He says, okay, she can wear this. And they leave. What can they do? They go to the Rebbe, and they spend Rosh Hashanah and Kippur there, and they have wonderful inspiration, and they go home. Next year, they're coming to the Rebbe for Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. And they're going from place to place and asking for hospitality. And then, don't really pay attention to how far they get, and they keep going the next day. Comes Friday afternoon, and there's town, and they go up to a door, and they're going to knock on the door. They knock on the door, and they say, hey, wait a minute. This is where we were last year. This is the farmer. And then the door opens, and they are now expecting to get a torrent of curses and abuse. You fakers, you lied to me, you're not Rebbe's, I had no child, and so forth and so on, because that's the truth, that's what happened. To their shock and surprise, the host says, wow, you came back, thank you so much, we had a baby boy, and we celebrated the bris, and you come in, you're our savior. It's like, they look at each other, what? What? How could this be? It's inconceivable. Oh, they spend a wonderful Shabbos with great joy and Thanksgiving, and he blesses them when they leave. You are such wonderful. You saved my life, and so on and so on. No. They continue on to the Rebbe. I forget who the Rebbe is in this story. Maybe somebody who sees the recording will remember and send me an email. They get there and they ask for private time with the Rebbe, and they told the Rebbe the whole story. So listen, I know I'm not a Rebbe. I know he's not. And then, what could I do? I was trapped, and of course I was lying. I feel terrible, but look what happened. There actually was a miracle. So the Rebbe said, I'll tell you, I know all about it, because I've been davening for this couple for years, and have not been able to get my prayers through. And the reason I haven't been able to get my prayers through is that the angels were blocking my prayers. But you were there, and you wrote that amulet. What did you write on the paper in that amulet? He said, I wrote, even an old cow can give milk. Even an old cow can give milk. That's my miracle. Here it is. Take it, right? The Rebbe said, the angels found that so hilarious. They were laughing so hard that they were distracted. And while they were distracted, I got my prayer through, and I was able to help them. Okay. Now, what do you make of a story like that? What occurs to you that of note or of interest in a story like that? Yeah.
But couple never checked the amulet, that they don't know how to read Hebrew, or did they miss it out?
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you.
On the amulet, it was written like, even an old cow gives milk. Like, how did couple miss it out? That there was
How did?
couple.
The couple, they didn't read it?
No, you don't read it. You don't read it. No. They leave it closed. That's why I said they wrapped it up in a cloth. They closed it with a string, so you can wear it around her neck. But you don't read it. No, absolutely not. Yeah.
What sticks out to me about that story is that it was based on a lie.
It was based on
the guys were lying to them.
The gods were lying.
The travelers.
The travelers. That's right. They were lying. That's right.
And they were impersonating the Rebbe, and then it still ended up to be a very good thing.
That's right. That's right. That needs to be understood. Like, you would expect that if they're impersonating a Rebbe and lying, they'd be punished for it. Okay, that's one thing. What else? Yeah. Anybody else before we go? Yeah.
Didn't they write the actual blessing on the paper?
No.
Why did they write that?
No.
Why not?
I don't know. Yeah.
They could have come up with some excuses to not write the amulet or give them bracha, but instead, even with knowing that they didn't have the proper authority or whatnot, they still attempted to give them a blessing.
Okay, so that's an important feature. They weren't just doing it to get out and run. They really did care about the host. They really did want him to have. They were just embarrassed that they were being credited with powers that they didn't have, and that might create expectations that wouldn't be fulfilled. But it isn't to say that they weren't sincere when they gave the blessing. Okay, I think that's an important part of the story. Yeah. What else?
That when they told the actual Rebbe about the story, he had this humorous response to it, and he didn't get mad at them for lying about being someone who they're not.
It's a humorous response, but of course, according to the story, he's telling them what really happened. He's not making up a joke to make them feel good. He's telling them what really happened. What do you think about the angels in this story?
Human-like characters. They had some fun.
They had some fun. Let's think. I think there's a little bit of a logical paradox in what happened with the angels. The angels laughed because it was hilarious that these fakers were doing something which was totally out of their league, totally beyond their capacity, and which couldn't have an effect. That's why they're laughing, because it couldn't have an effect. Oh, but then what was the result? It did have an effect. Their laughter over the fact that it couldn't have an effect is exactly what made it have an effect. Because the angels really were blocking the Rebbe's prayers. And by laughing and being distracted, his prayers could get in, and that's how the salvation took place. Because they laughed that it couldn't have an effect. That's the way in which it had an effect. That's very typical of situations in Jewish literature. Very typical. A person plans something for a certain purpose, and the very same thing is used for the opposite purpose. It's not as if this gets destroyed and something else takes its place. No! This itself is used for the opposite purpose. In the story of Purim, Haman, who hates Mordechai so much, wants to kill him, and goes to go to the king to kill him. And his wife says, let a gallows be built 50 cubits high, and hang Mordechai, when the king gives you permission, hang Mordechai on the gallows. And then tomorrow, when you go to the drinking banquet with the king, it's 50 gallows high because that's how tall it needs to be for you to be able to see Mordechai hanging on the gallows from the drinking room. And you'll enjoy that. So he builds it up. Terrific. Right? Fine. He goes into the king and asks for permission to kill Mordechai. And the king says, oh, just the person I wanted to see. Mordechai is a great person. He saved my life. I want you to personally honor him publicly in the streets. Well, you can imagine Haman wasn't happy with that. Fine. The next day, he's called to the drinking party, and Esther, the queen, accuses him. You're the one who signed the decree, you signed it, use the king's ring, but you signed the decree to destroy the Jewish people. I'm Jewish. You're decreeing that I and all my people should be destroyed. And the king is enraged against Haman. And then, at the very last moment, one of the courtiers says to the king, and look out the window. See that gallows there? Haman built that gallows to hang Mordechai who saved the king's life. And the king says, that's his end. Kill him. Kill Haman. So the gallows that was built to hang Mordechai so that Haman would be happy looking out the window, that gallows is used to seal the fate of Haman. This idea of taking what's there and using it to the opposite effect is something that's typical of the way Jewish logic works and the way Jewish events take place. So here's the example. Here is what the angels laughed was the laughing that it couldn't be done made it possible to be done. And this is typical of a broader perspective on angels. Very often angels miss the boat. I have to be very careful here, because angels have extremely great powers, extremely high powers. So when you talk about missing the boat, you have to define it in a very careful way so that as not to underestimate the powers that they have. Here's an example which gives you at least one case where you can see how to describe it in such a way that due credit is given to them, and yet you can see where they made the mistake. You've heard of the process of tshuva, which is translated as repentance. The rule of tshuva is, if you do tshuva for a transgression, no matter what and no matter when, you're forgiven for that transgression. No punishment can be applied. Like the Rambam writes, tshuva tris b'fnei peronius. It's a barrier which stops any kind of punishment. There may be other consequences for other reasons, but not punishment. There can't be any punishment after tshuva. Okay, so now, Menashe was a king, a very evil king. For decades, he did things which were absolutely terrible. At the end of his life, he did tshuva and repaired at least some of what he had done. When he died, the question became, what should happen to him? And the angel said, tshuva can repair, not for Menashe. Not for Menashe. He's too far gone. And that being the case, the angels blocked all of the pathways to heaven. They blocked them. What did the Kadosh Baruch Hu do? Kadosh Baruch Hu created a new pathway, a tunnel under the throne of glory, the Kisei HaKavod, and brought Menashe up that way. What's the lesson of the story? The lesson of the story is at least double. One is, tshuva always works. The idea that of the malachim, that a person could be so wicked that his tshuva couldn't repair him, is a wrong idea. But Each pathway that the angels blocked was blocked. If you take the judgment of an angel, he can't come up this way, he's right. He can't. And this way, and this way, and this way. All the ways that are paved to go up to heaven are really blocked. He isn't fit to go up any of them. So when each angel says this pathway is not for him, he's right. But the angel doesn't have a global view. The global view is if the established pathways don't work, then another pathway will be created, because tshuva always works. That part they didn't get correct. So you have that's a typical example of how the angels can miss something, but they can't. You can't put them in a position of simple mistake. Here it is funny when you look at it. It is funny to see these two bumpkins pretending to be a Rebbe and his attendant, and then having to act it out. It would be a very human scene to see. So laughing at it being funny is not inappropriate. But if the humor in it is that it can't work, that's a mistake. Because Baruch is running the world, and he can make it right. And you don't know the rest of the circumstances that are taking place. So that's another message in the story. The third message in the story is, do we really know what we're doing? Do we know what effect our actions have? They could dream that their blessing and their amulet would have any effect at all. That's because they too have a kind of stylized view of how the effect would take place, evoking God's mercy or God's pity, and so on, and the one who's a great Rebbe putting his merit on the line for them. That's the way it's supposed to work. We haven't got any of that, so clearly it's not going to work. No, it won't work that way. It won't work that way. Okay, but you can't predict how Kodesh Baruch Hu will use what happens, and in the end, it may indeed have the effect that you want, or the effect that you don't want. You can't predict how the outcome shall work. Think of Moses. The soothsayers of the Egyptians predict that the Savior of the Jewish people is being born now. Oh, thank God for the soothsayers, huh? We'll just kill all the boys. There was no Havamina that would be a girl. No possibility it would be a girl. It has to be a boy. Kill all the boys and we solve the problem. Right? So they go out and try to kill all the boys. Moses escapes because his mother puts him in a basket, and Pharaoh's daughter finds him and decides to have pity on him, the whole story. What's the result? Not only is Moses saved from the decree, and the Savior of the Jewish people is thereby provided to the Jewish people, but he brought up in the palace. He gets a king's education. That's part of his formation. He's going to be king of the Jewish people. When he takes the Jewish people, God takes the Jewish people, and he's God's agent, he takes on the position of king. Vayhi b'shurul melech, there was a king in the Jewish people, and one explanation was Moses himself. He played the role of king. So the decree that he should be killed caused the mother of Moses to put him by the river. And then divine providence had the daughter there to see him and take pity on him. And thereby he's brought into the palace to receive a king's education. So the strategy for destroying the Jewish Savior becomes a strategy whereby the Jewish Savior gets a king's education so he can become the Jewish Savior. This type of irony is built into the events that take place. And it means, one thing that it means is that when you look and see what happens, it's very hard. It's very hard to explain to someone why that's happening, because it may be designed to have an effect that he can't even imagine. I know someone who is extremely wealthy, Chassidic guy who is a builder, very wealthy, and he's a very strong chassid of the former Vizhnitzer Rebbe in Muncie. He's now also a Vizhnitzer chassid, and he was slated to conduct a deal for $30 million, which in 6 months he would have made another 10 or 20. I mean, it was a very good deal. And he went to the Rebbe, as he always did, and asked, should I do the deal or not? And the Rebbe said, no. I mean, it's like money in pocket. The Rebbe said, no. So he said, no. He didn't do it. 2 months later, the other side went broke. This person whom I know is in the business. He knows the people, he knows the banks, he knows the lawyers. He knows it. He's got the information, inside information. He's playing with hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And he didn't see it. But the Rebbe saw it. How did the Rebbe see it? He wasn't doing insider trading, the Rebbe. He wasn't consulting with the banks. He just knew. So there you can see you have a lesson. You can look at it and it can seem absolutely obvious and plain to you what's going on, and that's not what's going on. And that's why you need people who can see better, see farther, see deeper, because they're looking at it with different eyes, looking at it with eyes that are tinged with the secrets of how the world works. Now, that's not to say that these people, like the Rebbes, are omniscient, not to say they know everything. No, certainly not. Only God is omniscient. It's not to say that they never make mistakes. Not to say that either. No. The only one who never makes mistakes is the Kodesh Baruch Hu, but they have a very good percentage. A very good percentage. And that being the case, if you're left to your own devices, you'll get it right 2% of the time. And if you listen to them, you might get it right 80% of the time. It's definitely worthwhile. People make the mistake of thinking, well, they're human, aren't they? Yes. So they're fallible, aren't they? Yes. Therefore, here's their conclusion, they're no better than anybody else. No, that's not the right conclusion. They might be a lot better than everybody else. You wouldn't do that with medicine. Can the doctor make mistakes? Yes. So think up your own therapy. No, actually, because although he could make a mistake, much more likely that he'll get it right than I'll get it right. So I think that's the way we have to look at these people. And when you have your own personal experience with this, then it gives you a lot more confidence than when just hear stories. I should tell you that when I was sitting in your chair at your age and experimenting with Judaism, I became convinced that the Torah was given at Sinai, the Talmud is valid, Shulchan Aruch has to be obeyed, basic values, philosophy. But when people told me miracle stories about Rebbes, I said, leave me alone. Okay, I don't need that. I'm committed. I'm going to do all the mitzvos. And these stories could be exaggerated, or who knows what their origin is. I don't need that. I was just, I was independent of that and quite skeptical. I'm a skeptical person altogether. But then when they started to happen to me, in the end, I want to be open to learning from experience. If the skepticism makes it impossible for you to learn from experience, then just to put it the way I would put it as a logician, then you've failed to be skeptical of your skepticism. If you're a real skeptic, you have to be skeptical about yourself also. Skepticism has to work 360 degrees. And then you think, well, maybe my skepticism causes me to miss something because my logic isn't perfect, my analysis isn't perfect, my evidence is always incomplete. Maybe I'm using the skepticism in the wrong way. So, for example, I was married to my first wife for 54 years. And we had a very close relationship with our Rabbi, the Boston Rabbi Zatzal. We called, we visited, we spent Shabbos and holidays there. We shared celebrations together. And he would call us also. One Friday morning, he called. I picked up the phone. He said, hello, let me speak to your wife. Not hello, how are you? Have a good Shabbat. Nothing. To me, nothing. Let me speak to your wife. I gave her the phone. And he said to her, are you all right? She said, yes. He asked her 3 times if she's okay. And she assured him that he was okay. He said, okay, have a good Shabbos. She turned to me and looked at me. What was that? It was very bizarre. Always, how are the children doing? How are the schools for your children? There was we catching up on things. No, just, are you okay? Sunday morning, she had a miscarriage. We are told that a miscarriage is the result of the death of the fetus 24 to 48 hours before. He felt it. We didn't know about it. He felt it. So he called. That's one phone call in 54 years. What's the chance he got it right by accident? 0. I was negotiating for a certain job, a certain position. The negotiation was going back and forth. I called the Rebbe about it. He said, it won't go through. He didn't know the employer, and he didn't know my credentials. It won't go through. And it didn't go through. I had a certain, what I thought was a heart incident. And I went to a doctor, a cardiologist. He said, we don't know. We're not sure. Take it easy. Take it easy. If you walk upstairs, walk slowly. And, and then let the thing go for a few months. We'll check again. And, that's what he told me. That's what I called the Rebbe. He laughed. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. There was nothing there. Right? I was here. He was in America, 6,000 miles away. But nothing there is nothing there. Okay, so now, how many times does this have to happen for you to begin to think, hey, he knows something? Like, it was a typical, when someone got pregnant, to ask the Rebbe when we should tell other people. And usually it was the end of the 3rd month. I would say that was the rule. One couple and one baby, he said, don't tell. And in the 4th month, don't tell. And in the 5th month, don't tell. And then there was a miscarriage. Getting that right by accident is very difficult. And there are many, many stories like this. A friend of mine with whom I've been learning regularly for 60 years. I live with him every day. He, by the way, has a doctorate from MIT in something called nuclear physical chemistry. The right guy. His wife is a labor coach. And they're both very close to the Rebbe. When a baby was breached, you know what that means? Coming out the wrong way, with the head behind. And the doctors want to do a C-section. She would call the Rebbe, and he would say, give me 20 minutes. And in 20 minutes, the baby would turn around. That happened dozens of times. So he's an eyewitness, and it happened. So you have that much experience, you begin to think, hey, I'm not getting the whole picture. I'm not seeing the whole picture. There's more to what's going on than we thought. Now, I don't expect you to believe me. Look at the hat I'm wearing. You don't believe anybody with a hat like that. But I want to open your mind to the possibility so that you don't miss it if it happens. And if it starts to happen, then you can take account of it. We tend to see what we expect to see. And that causes us to miss what can be right in front of our faces. I'll show you something. If you've seen this before, don't say anything. Let the others experience it because it has a very profound lesson. What did I write? No, I didn't. What did I write?
Paris in the spring.
Oh, Paris in the spring. Did you see it the first time? Did you notice the repetition of the? Most people don't. Because it's not what you expect. You expect Paris in the spring. You don't see the other the. And there was a beautiful demonstration. There's a wonderful video. This is unbelievable. Where you see people passing a basketball. A bunch of people passing a basketball back and forth and bouncing the ball and going from one to the other. And you watch this video. It's like, I guess, 2 minutes or something. And then they ask you, did you see the gorilla? What? What? I mean, it's just people passing the basketball. Okay, now look again. The gorilla goes through, he waves at the camera, and he goes off the other side, and nobody sees him. You don't see him. It's unbelievable. I myself didn't see him. Till they told me there's a gorilla coming across. And then, when I looked at it, I slowed it down and stopped it, and then I could see him. But the first time, because I was told I'm going to be looking at people passing a basketball, and I saw people, but nothing else, registered. Just didn't register. You have a spell check. It was once upon a time, in the Middle Ages, about 400 years ago, the spell checker was human. There was a manuscript, and he had to check to make sure that the spelling was correct. You had to be trained to do that. Because when you look at the word and you're reading the context, you know what the word has to be, you'll see the letters you expected, and you won't see the letters on the page, and you won't notice that it's wrong. The trouble with today's spell checkers is that although you spell the word right, it might be the wrong word for the context. That it doesn't get typically. Then you can put in grammar things, okay. So if you don't have in your mind the expectation of something like this, then you'll miss it when it happens. The Chazon Ish describes what it means to trust in the Kodesh Baruch Hu. This is a big subject and it has lots of ramifications, but he makes one point which I want to use here. He says, one thing that trust in the Kodesh Baruch Hu means is that you don't know for sure what's going to happen in the next minute. The Gemara puts it this way, even when the sword is on his neck and the first drops of blood are flowing down the sword, don't give up hope of salvation. Because anything can happen in the next moment. The very fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is all-powerful means nothing's fixed. Nothing's established unbreakably. Because Baruch Hu can break anything. He can change the course of events at any moment. So, that being the case, you have to have, in your picture of the future, you have to have a little question mark in that box, which says something might happen that I totally don't expect. Let me see if I can remember the details of the story that my Rebbe told me just a few weeks ago. It was Rav Kreisworth. He was in the Warsaw Ghetto, and he managed to escape. He was part of the yeshiva, and he was separate from the yeshiva. The whole yeshiva was wiped out. He managed to escape. But he was caught. He was out in Warsaw, and had no identification, no papers, and certainly looked dressed like a Jew. He was caught. So the German soldiers said, they assigned one of them, take him out into the forest and kill him. Okay, he's marching out. The guy takes out his gun, and he says, you know something? It's a German soldier talking. You know something? I have a son your age. I'm not going to shoot you. I'll shoot into the sky, you run. They'll tell him that I shot you. How was it that this German soldier was the one that took him out and had the son and suddenly thought of his son? And so who put that thought into his mind that he suddenly thought of his son? Because Rav Kreisler had predicted that he would survive that event? Certainly not. So if you're not open-minded, if your eyes have wide focus, you can miss the signal. And that would be very tragic, because it just has to happen one way. So this is part of being aware and looking for the aspects of things that aren't obvious and aren't exposed and open, so that you can take advantage of them when they happen. I was standing by the bus stop the day before yesterday, and a guy, total stranger, gets off and he says, "Who are you?" I don't know. And he gives me a card. And on the card, there is what's called a skula. A skula is something you can do when you need help for something. And it can be something trivial. I lost my keys. I've lost a book. Please help me find it. And especially if you vow to give charity, if you find the thing, there are those that help. We've had Very good experience. I'll just tell you, again, things like this happen. A friend of my wife has a friend who told her of a new such school, a certain name of a certain tzaddik, which you say, and you say, I'll give charity in his name, when you're looking for something. Right? So we looked for a book that she uses regularly. We checked all the shelves and the closets and the drawers twice. We went through the whole house twice, and we couldn't find it. She said this person's name and put some money in the charity, and within 3 minutes she found it. On the bookcase! It was on the bookcase! We just didn't see it. It was hidden at a funny angle. It wasn't hidden behind. It was hidden at a funny angle. We just didn't see it. The both of us. So that was one example. 3 days ago, she was missing something else, and she forgot the name of the person who was supposed to say. She called up her friend. It was a piece of a mixer in the kitchen which had disappeared, like a metal rod about this big. I looked in the kitchen. I looked under the various things. She called her friend and she said, "What's the name that I'm supposed to say for that schooler?" Friend said it. My wife said the name, and as she's saying the name, she saw it. At that instant, it was underneath the washing machine, but the washing machine has a little space, and it was deeply underneath. She was standing far enough away from the washing machine to see underneath and find it when she said the name. Okay, so, it's not really. I lost my glasses. I could not find my glasses. I went all throughout the house and everything else. I promised money to Tzedakah, and I had a bunch of her grandchildren searching for it. One grandchild found it right away. What was it? Outside the house is the electric box. And in the electric box, there's a Shabbos clock. In order to set the Shabbos clock, I have to take off my glasses because I have to see the numbers and see the buttons and so forth and so on. And I had taken off my glasses and left them in the electric box outside the house. And it didn't occur to me to think of looking there. One of her grandchildren thought of it right away. Right away. He went straight there and found them and got his 100 shekels. But, I had promised money to the charity in addition to the reward that he got. And I have been looking at it and had other people looking for it. When I decided that I was going to give charity and offered money to the kids, it was found right away. So these things, and again, a schooler, like Rabbi Heinemann in Baltimore defined it for us once, a schooler is something that could help. We're not talking about magic now, and we're not talking about something that's guaranteed. Even surgery isn't guaranteed. That doesn't mean surgery is worthless, does it? Because it's not guaranteed, because sometimes it doesn't work, that doesn't mean it's worthless. If somebody says, I tried at school and it didn't work, okay, so what? That mean all schools are worthless? That it wasn't worthwhile trying? You wouldn't say that about surgery, so why should you say it about this? Now, having told you these stories, I want to tell you one more story, which has also an ending of the limitations that we have to accept. This is about the Chafetz Chaim, and if you'll say, but the Chafetz Chaim was a Chassidic, I'll say you're wrong, he was. And we don't measure being Chassidic by whether you wear a fur hat or not. It's the principles that you espouse, the way in which you live your life. The word Chassid precedes the modern Chassidic movement. It's a word in the Tanakh, the Holy Hebrew Bible. A man had a son who was very sick, and the doctors gave up on him. So they went to the Chafetz Chaim. Chafetz Chaim said, I know a doctor. I'll tell you his name. I'll tell you where he lives. Go to him. He can cure this problem. Got the name. They made the trip. It was quite a distance. And they found this doctor. He said, yes, I do have a remedy for this problem. Gave them the remedy. They came home and gave it to his son. And his son recovered. Chafetz Chaim said, don't tell the story to anybody. Don't tell it to anybody. Okay? So he didn't tell it to anybody. But 10 years later, how many years it was, he was getting engaged to get married. 10 years, he's been healthy, right? The father felt that he could tell the story. He told the story. The son got sick again. They went to the doctors. Got worse and worse. No help. So he went back to the Chafetz Chaim, and he had to admit that he told the story. Rabbi Chaim said, I told you not to tell the story. I fasted for your son 40 days. The doctor didn't do anything. The doctor was just to hide what I did. The doctor's remedy was worthless. I fasted for him for 40 days, and I don't have the strength to do it again. And the boy died. So, we who would hear the story would say, look at that. The rabbi knew a doctor unexpectedly. The rabbi keeps up with the latest medical advances, and he said, isn't that nice that the doctor could put in touch with the doctors and so on? That's not what's going on at all. Not at all. That had nothing to do with it. It was just a cover-up. And sometimes people cover up what they do. So then when you think, well, he did this, and you automatically think, was it good, was it bad, was it nice, wasn't it nice? How could he have done it? What were his motivations? Part of you has to have that question mark. Do I know what's really going on? Yeah, I'll finish with a story. This is a story which also really happened. The Bach was a very great scholar. He wrote a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, which is very important, very authoritative. The Taz is another commentator who was his son-in-law. And when they got married, the son-in-law and the father-in-law made an agreement that the father-in-law would supply the son-in-law with support while he was learning. And the support included a meat meal every day. That's what it was. The Taz is a very, very great commentator in his own right. One day, the only meat that was available was some substandard cut, whether it was lung or brain or something like that. And the result of it was the Taz took his father-in-law to a din Torah, to a court session, accusing him of having broken the contract. Wow, when that got around, what? You're taking your father-in-law to a court because he didn't give you the right meat for the day? People were like, couldn't understand. And, as a matter of fact, in the court case, the Taz lost. The court found in favor of the Bach that yes, that inferior grade of meat did fulfill the conditions of the contract, and there was no breach of contract. Years later, the Taz told people, here's what was going on. He gave me that inferior meat. I ate it, and it wasn't as sufficient as the other days, and my learning suffered for that day. And there was a critique against my father-in-law in heaven that he caused me to have inferior learning that day. But we have a rule that the court in heaven follows the decisions of the court on earth. And I knew I would lose in the court on earth. I knew I would lose. I went in order to lose, so that he should be freed from the critique in heaven. I wanted to protect my father-in-law from the critique in heaven. Wow. No one would think of that on his own. No one would dream of that. When you hear that, you have to think, do I know what's going on? Not really. Not really. So I have to have a little distance from understanding my own circumstances, and that has two consequences. Number one, if there's in the Shulchan Aruch it says, under these circumstances this is what you should do, then you do it. Whether you see that it's going to solve the problem or don't see that it's going to solve the problem. And if you don't know what to do, which often is the case because these circumstances are complicated, there are nuances, then you have to go to somebody who's a scholar of the whole tradition and who can understand the nuances that you describe, so he can tell you what the tradition wants from you in this particular case. And then, when you do it, you know that that's what needed to be done, no matter what the outcome. You don't judge the advice that you got from the rabbi on the grounds that, well, I was trying to save my business from foreclosure, and he gave me this advice, and it got foreclosed anyway, so his advice was wrong. No, that's not a right conclusion. He gave you the advice to do what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted you to do. And the outcome is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted the outcome to be. And you may be in the best of all circumstances. And you won't know the circumstances that you avoid or the other things that would have happened had you done it differently. So you don't judge the correctness of the advice that you get on the grounds of whether you got what you wanted or not. You judge it on the grounds that this is a person who is a person who's a tzaddik and who knows the whole Torah, and he's the medium through whom HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving me the instruction that I should have, so as to do what needs to be done. For example, Abraham and Sarah have no children. Sarah says to Abraham, take my handmaid to wife, perhaps she'll have a child and I'll be built up through her. She thinks that by this strategy she'll gain some merit, and that way HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give her the opportunity to have a child. So Abraham says he listened to Sarah. He would never have done it on his own. He listened to her, and he takes Hagar to wife, and she has a child. And Sarah doesn't. Does that mean that Sarah made a mistake? That what she did was wrong? That what she did was worthless? No, not at all. Not at all. She did something which is ordinarily associated with having a child. This was her effort. Effort counts. Effort goes in the record book. You made that effort. It's just that now's not the time. Now's not the time. The time will be later. So we don't say that, the idea is that nothing gets lost. Nothing ever gets lost. History is permanent. Everything is there, and everything is used for the outcome that's appropriate when the time is appropriate. So again, we don't judge these events on the basis of whether we get the outcome we hope for or anticipated. Very rarely will a great person tell you, I promise you this outcome. It does happen. When I hear about it, I get shivers down my back. Because you're not God and you're not a prophet. But I did hear of cases where it worked spectacularly. So it was a case of a divorce, very tragic divorce. The boy turned out to be physically abusive. And the girl, I know the family, so they got divorced, and she had a certain type of head covering on, and she went to Amnon Yitzchak. Amnon Yitzchak is a well-known, he himself is about tshuva. He was a lawyer. He had a ponytail down to his waist, and he became about tshuva, and he worked in inspiring people and teaching people all over the country. He had an organization called Shofar. Don't hear about him so much right now, but for a decade or more, he was very active and very, very influential. And they went to him to ask what to do, and he said, I think you should change your head covering. Don't cover your head this way. A more complete head covering. She didn't want to do it. I don't know why. I don't remember the circumstances. She didn't want to do it. A year went by. Another year went by. Nothing doing. They went back to him, and he said, I told you. You have to change your head covering. So then, out of despair, she changed it. Within 2 months, she was engaged. Accident? Sure. And all science could be an accident also. I mean, when she didn't do it, it didn't happen. When she did it, it happened. When I heard that he predicted it, I told you, I get fearful, because what happens if it doesn't work? What happens if what you say, what you promise doesn't take place? You have to be in a very, very special level to make promises like that. But then you hear of cases where the promises come true. So you have to realize that that's part of what's going on. Anyway, I hope this leads people to be more careful and cautious about judging what other people do, or what happens in their own lives, or what happens politically, to be more cautious and be aware of the fact that we can really get things wrong. Okay, have a good Shabbos.